Welcome to Talk of the Town. I'm Phil Arno.
And I'm Kim Piazza. We've all heard of ride-sharing services like Uber and Lyft, and that's where licensed drivers sign up to offer service to riders who request pickups through a mobile phone app with social media used to rate the drivers and the ride experience.
Who are these drivers? Is the rider safe? Established taxi and limousine services here in Western New York say the ride-sharing experience may come with a greater price than just the ride itself. You'll meet presidents of Liberty Cab Company and the taxi and Broadway Taxi to make their case for the taxi drivers.
But pressure is mounting to bring sharing to our hometown. Our cameras were at a recent news conference where a bipartisan presentation was made that says ride sharing is the future.
We want all visitors to have a seamless experience and a great first impression when they arrive here in Buffalo. And ride sharing is an expected amenity and it is very obvious in its absence. We feel that Buffalo can support rideshare along with our taxi companies, with our public transportation, and with our car rental. So we do feel that there's a place for all of these transportation opportunities in our destination.
We're tired of being in the Stone Age. I hear from people constantly. It's one of the most important issues that people contact my office about. We hear from visitors. We heard about 43,000 people over the Thanksgiving weekend. Visitors to New York State tried to get a rideshare, an Uber or a Lyft, and couldn't. They were shocked that we didn't have it. We heard about the horror stories on New Year's Eve, that there was just too many people looking for cabs and there were problems. Nobody is saying that we're going to try and eliminate cabs altogether. We believe that they can coexist peacefully. And, you know, there's nothing wrong with a little healthy competition. I'm looking forward to getting this done.
It's so important to the business community that I will share with you that our advocacy agenda, which gets released next week, has ride sharing as one of the things that the business community is standing for this year. We are the second largest city in the state. This is the opposite of the New Buffalo. So every time we think we're making progress and someone comes here, they say, no, not so much. I mean, they don't even have Uber. So for us, as a branding of our community, beyond all the safety and all the visitor experience and all the great things, all the good reasons, it's like Easy Pass. There's nothing bad about this, right? The statement it makes about our community to not have it sets us back and sets back all the efforts all of us have been collecting working on.
Joining us now to explain their reaction and their positions are the owner of Liberty Cab Company, Bill Yunke, and the president of Broadway Taxi, Brian Drake. Welcome, guys.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here. I think it's good for us to get the point of view from our local taxi companies and, of course, owner, operator, fellows in Western New York.
Well, there's pros and cons on both sides, and we have to get an idea of how the competition would affect you guys. Now, competition is normally a good thing, but you guys are regulated by the bureaucracy, if you will. The government dictates to you how much you can charge and certain, safety regulations. Uber wouldn't be operating under the same regulations, so the competition isn't exactly a fair, playing field. That's one consideration. Tell me some of the pros and cons.
Well, that's exactly the point, is that it's not level and it's not fair. A lot of people say that, well, geez, they have it in New York City, yet we don't have it in the rest of the state. But you got to dig a little bit deeper than that. They're actually abiding by all the rules and regulations of the TLC in New York. They're paying the same insurance as we are. The drivers are vetted and permitted in the same way that they're supposed to be doing in New York City. So they're following all the rules. They could operate here tomorrow if they would follow all the rules and regulations that the city of Buffalo has set up.
I haven't heard this, so let me make sure I understand what you're saying, Bill. Uber, in their desire to move to Buffalo, doesn't want to do what Uber in New York City has done in making it the same standard to operate by the Buffalo
taxi codes
that are set forth by the government here in Buffalo, and is that really kind of the crux of it?
Yes, exactly. Their business model is different, and so they can't operate at a profit charging less if they're paying the same fees and regulation things that we have to deal with. So that's where it's not level right off the get-go. But they could operate here tomorrow if they would abide by those same rules and regulations.
Well, in your opinion, what would be better? To have your regulations and standards lowered to compete with Uber, or to have Uber's regulations and rules raised to your standards?
I want to hear Brian on that
Yes.
one.
Well, I would say if they're going to come, and it's it's such a need for them, which I kind of beg to differ, make it even. You know what I'm saying? I've been paying $5,000 a car for 40 years. We've had this company. My dad bought it in 1978. He passed away recently. I've continued to run it, and we've had these rules and regulations because they were so important to have. Now all of a sudden that Uber wants to come here, those rules and regulations aren't so important for them. And they're an outside company. They haven't been paying taxes and contributing to the neighborhood and in Buffalo like we have, feeding families, taking people here and there to work, from work, their kids, what have you. And now all of a sudden, since Uber wants to come, we don't have to do background checks. They don't need licenses. They don't need city plates. They don't need medallions. They don't need the insurance that we have because they're Uber. That's just the loyalty to me. Is just.
So do you feel like it's in your best interest if regulations were then to be changed for you? So you mentioned to have the same and equal ground that the business is operating on, because the idea that one has to meet this standard and one does not is strange.
I would rather keep it the same because due to the fact of the issue of liability and what have you, I can't put a car on for $500 a year for insurance because if something happens, it's not covered.
So you're just not comfortable with the regulations being lowered.
Right.
That's not
because
where
the regulations
you feel...
being where they are protect me to a certain extent. I make my guys get a background check. I make them go to the police station. I check their background. I make sure that they're of a person that I would want my child or my family member taking a cab with. I don't do a online 5-minute check you out, you're rolling type of thing.
Yeah,
And
okay.
on the insurance issue, if you look at or call your insurance agent up, and I would challenge anyone to do that that's listening to us, and ask them, can they drive their personal insurance car and pick up people for a fare? There's an exclusion on the insurance policy that says it can't. That's why they went to the state to get that law amended. But everything in the TNC bill does not include taxi cabs. So we're not even in part of the bill conversation. If someone would save me and Brian $4,500 a car, we're in.
Right.
But no one's offered that to us, so it's not level even there either. So the fact is, the bill is strictly to allow them to operate differently than ground transportation.
Yet do the same thing.
Okay, so the main differences, let me understand, the main differences that you're concerned about are insurance, background checks, and is it the rates that they charge as well, or is it just basically insurance and background checks?
I would say those the first two is what the issue is. We are set by the rates by the city of Buffalo. And those rates were formed and developed to operate so everybody can make a living based on the economy. So the economy includes insurance, it's gas on the car. I would love to have Uber and Lyft work into one of our Buffalo winners. And they're going to find out about the transmissions that's got to be replaced in that car. And they're going to find about the engines. And they're going to find out about how difficult it is. In my situation, we transport somewhere around 30 trips a day. So do the math, 30 times 7 times 30. Those are a lot of people that one vehicle is transporting in our city.
I did try to spend a lot of time looking into the ride share versus taxi cabs, and one of the things that I did read as far as the price, we were talking insurance and gas and all of that factoring into what you're charging, that there have been studies and they have found that actually Uber is more expensive if you're doing city transportation,
Short
city
rides.
driving, right?
Right, okay.
And that Uber then in the long run is less expensive if you're doing a longer haul. And I think people assume that Uber's probably just across the board less expensive, but it turns out it's a little more expensive for the short haul.
Well, I looked up a list of pros and cons for Uber. One of the downsides of Uber that I found was that they have something called surge prices. And that surprised me because at least from what I read, if there's a shortage of cars, they can, or in a busy time when there's just not enough cars to meet demand, they can raise prices at their discretion. So you can, expect a ride that's going to cost you $40, it can end up costing you $120.
That's correct.
Without notice, I guess.
Does the rider, does the person who's getting into the Uber car, do they know before they get in that it's a surge charge?
I don't know. I guess they would probably know.
They would know.
Yeah.
We've been told that that they do. Matter of fact, I've driven in some undercover Uber cars to do my research. But the biggest thing here, I heard the county legislator made a statement in the opening of the show, and he said it was a nightmare on New Year's. Everybody in the world is trying to get a vehicle on New Year's, okay? And if we're 45 minutes, we're normally there in 5 or 10. I think 45 minutes is pretty good. I don't think you can get a pizza
Anywhere.
for less than that.
Not just Buffalo.
So it's all over the world.
Right.
It's very difficult. Everyone's using a cab on New Year's.
Yeah.
I don't think that was a very fair statement.
Right.
But
Yeah,
if
you
you want
can't
to call
judge
me
on
up and pay me $500 for that trip, I'll guarantee I'll get a cab there. Right? Might
Yeah.
be you.
Yeah, it might be
but
me.
you know what? But then you move to supply and demand, and if you have a customer who's willing to pay hundreds of dollars for that ride,
We can't.
But Uber could.
But
So
Uber could.
I read a story about someone in New York City this year on New Year's Eve paying $400 for an Uber ride. But if that person knew getting into the car it was $400, they made that choice, right? They made the choice. Which, gee, I kind of wish you guys could raise your rates when you're that busy. You can't.
I can't.
You can't because you're regulated that way.
Right.
But that'd be kind of cool for you, wouldn't it?
That would be interesting.
It
but,
would be interesting to say the least. Well, I know we've got a commercial break and so much more to talk about when we come back. So, Phil?
Yeah, I think this is going to be an interesting conversation. When we come back, we're going to find out what it's like to get behind the wheel of one of these cars.
My view is, though, this is going to be a net gain on anybody that is transporting people, because it's going to cause more people to opt to not take their car somewhere or opt to have a car. So I think that is actually going to open up a whole new segment of the population, the majority of people who are not entertaining going places but for driving themselves. So I think this is a great opportunity, and I think it will be a boon actually for taxi cab companies and the new alternative transportation options you see in ride sharing. So I think and that's what they've seen in other areas. It's been a benefit, and I don't believe the taxi cab industry is dying on the vine in New York City. There's just more people exercising options, whether it's ride sharing, taxi cabs, or public transportation.
Senator, one of the issues that the taxi cab lobby has brought up is about safety, and that some of the drivers, the Uber and Lyft drivers, maybe don't have as vetted a criminal check. How do you respond to that, and how would you look into that?
I think it's a legitimate thing to talk about. My understanding is, Uber has a very rigorous background check, so that discussion needs to be had, whether you have to have fingerprints to match that. Having been very involved with fingerprinting in the clerk's office, because we do that with pistol permits, I know there's a lot of flaws in that system as well. But let's keep in mind, we have to balance the safety issues. Now, there was 43,000 people who went online on Wednesday night before, on their phones, on Wednesday night before Thanksgiving weekend. A lot of them had been drinking, who tried to take an alternative transportation option. Some of those may have gotten in their cars because they did not have that option. So that's a safety issue, too, that you need to balance. And I take that very serious. That's a lot of people.
I have to give a lot of credit to our leaders, Assemblyman Schimminger, Senator Ransenhofer, all of our Senate delegation, all of our Assembly delegation, as we work together as a team. If there is an issue that's good and positive for Western New York, we're all supportive of it. We are in a technology age. It would be like saying, you know, I'm not going to use email in my office. I remember when I first started working, you know, people would send letters to the office. They would make phone calls. We still get letters and phone calls, but predominantly we receive email. You have to change with the times. This is a global economy now, and people expect, if Buffalo expects to be part of the global economy, they expect to have these amenities, and especially people have a choice now. We're a very mobile community. You know, the one thing about this is customers get rated, drivers get rated. So if there is someone looking to reach out to someone and they have a bad experience and they're a bad customer, well, they probably won't get another ride. And I've heard complaints prior to ride sharing from cab drivers about their safety, especially in bad areas of the city. We know there are some tough areas, but we're hopeful that through technology we can share who the bad clients are. People who get out of cabs, they take a ride and they don't pay for their taxi ride. Hopefully that'll stem that. So we're hopeful, and like I said, it's a changing economy. It's a changing world out there, and you know, the need is not being met, and someone is looking to fill that gap, and ride sharing and Uber obviously have done that. So, you know, the taxi cab service has to change with the times.
Welcome back to Talk of the Town. It's very interesting.
Well, and there's so much to this discussion, and of course we're continuing our discussion with Bill Yunke of Liberty Cab and Brian Drake of Broadway Taxi. When we heard about background checks, there was a visible and audible cringe happening over here, and so I think we need to hear about that.
Yeah, it's not an equal playing field there as well, is what I'm hearing you guys say.
Again, when we first opened up the program, we talked about the fairness, and you're only getting one side, you know, thanks to you and this station. You saw the site to at least get the other side of the story, and we want to thank you for that. But you know, to say that when I hear things taking more drunk drivers off the street, you know, we've been doing it for hundreds of years. You know, somebody wants to go home, they're going to still call or use an app to get home. If it's the Uber app or ride-sharing app, or it's my app. You know, I have not heard anyone say, I've had an app that we have here in Buffalo for the last 3 years at least, and one's a national app, and it's called Curb. And we're connected to 65 cities across the country. So it's not new. Did the cab industry have to get better? Absolutely. So we had to sharpen our pencil a little bit. But having, when you're asking about credit card and cashless system, I'm concerned, and I think Brian is concerned about the folks who don't have a credit card, you know, that they can't pay for their trip.
That's very interesting. That's very interesting.
So we're concerned about those folks. So we're going to fight for those people that are in our community that could not get into a vehicle anyways. And the other difference is you can't just jump into an Uber. If you think you're downtown Buffalo and you can hail and say stop, they're not supposed to pick you off the street. So you got to demand that service by the app. So there are quite a bit of differences, and the public has to know when they can use it and when. I don't know about you, Brian, but I get a lot of calls from bar owners and bouncers. Well, if they don't have the app and your app to charge it to your account, you can't call for a cab there either, or an Uber.
I don't feel like people are saying that. I don't hear people saying Uber's better, taxi service is better. I feel like I hear people saying they want both.
Yeah, it might be a situation where there is room for both. You know, taxi services have been around for, like you say, for forever. And this is kind of a new take on a service which has been around forever. It kind of modernizes the service. But the pluses and minuses we've discussed. It seems to me that if there's certain adjustments to the requirements, there may be a fit for Uber. Now, let me ask you a question. Would the adjustments for requirements of background checks and insurance, would that be a local ordinance or a state regulation?
Well, I believe I'll answer that one if you don't mind, Brian. It was local until the governor spoke.
Okay.
The governor said that he's going to take over the regulations of TNCs.
There's a little confusion now.
There's very confusion. I didn't hear him say he's taking over the regulations of the taxi cabs. He said he's going to take over the regulation of the TNCs. So now the question is the city of Buffalo willing to give up that control to the state?
That's interesting.
There's a question that needs to be asked to our city fathers, our council, and to our mayor.
We're in kind of uncharted territory here. I don't think you can ever make everybody happy, but you can kind of make things fair as possible. But who do you turn to do that?
Well, the fact of the matter is, they keep saying there's room and changing with the times and all that talk that I keep hearing from these officials, government officials. The whole fact of the matter is, something that always defies room and whatnot is simple business and supply and demand, okay? We take care of everyone that calls Broadway Taxi, everyone. I'm sure he takes care of everyone who calls Liberty. We're out here, been out here for years, okay? There's not an over-influx of people in which we don't get to. So I'd just like to know, where are all these people that all of a sudden need cabs that aren't being taken care of?
So you're not experiencing this, this issue, this perceived issue that there just aren't enough rides for people. You're not seeing that.
No, I don't. I do not.
Well, it's not like New York City. In this area,
Huge difference.
You know, we
Huge
have, how many
difference.
cabs are there in Western New York?
Right now, I believe with the latest influx of medallions, I think we have somewhere around 500 taxi cabs that are
and
operating
for this
in the city of Buffalo.
population, that's adequate?
Is that average?
It's more than adequate.
Right.
Okay.
Population has dropped down from years prior, and we have more cabs now than we had back then.
Are there any statistics as to what the average wait time would be for a cab? You know, are people being taken care of pretty quickly under most circumstances?
Everything but Thanksgiving and Christmas or New Year's are the two exceptions. Absolutely. I dread those 2 days. I do. I think that the city of Buffalo could have done something to make it easier those 2 days. They could have issued temporary permits for us to put on more vehicles for that for those days, so we can make it up. But we weren't allowed to do that.
They regulate even how many cars you have on the street
That's
at
correct.
any one time. Very interesting. Well, some final thoughts when we come back. Welcome back to Talk of the Town.
Well, in the end, if ride sharing happens, what's going to happen to cab companies? And if Uber is not regulated to the same standards, then it's not fair competition. And that's kind of the bottom line. And I think you stated it. If they had to be held to the same insurance and background checks, then it wouldn't be such an argument. And, and to put basically the thing in perspective, we need to figure out who to appeal to, whether it's state officials or local officials, get cut through the chaos and the confusion. Who's going to make these decisions?
Well, you know, Phil, the first thing that we hear about, obviously, is the cost. It's cheaper. I think we always hear that. But in reality, the ride-sharing companies, Uber and Lyft, is compensating for the trip. The last quarter, it was public knowledge that they lost $16 billion. I don't know about you, but I couldn't afford to lose $1 billion. They lost 16.
They make it up in the volume,
and
right?
even a lot of the drivers from New York City, the Uber drivers, I don't know if Brian is seeing this, but I'm getting Uber drivers coming to Buffalo to drive for me, telling me they're not making a good living. So, you know, those are a lot of issues that's got to be addressed. One of the things I like to tell your viewers is that there's a website called www.who'sdrivingyou.org. Check it out. I mean, you can see for yourself some of the experiences that other folks have had in a ride-sharing company. If it works for you, use it.
Brian,
Also,
Brian, earlier you mentioned about the background checks, and so, you know, Bill, you're saying who'sdrivingyou.com, and who's driving you, it's that background check. And you were mentioning to me one of your problems with this ride share is the way that's handled. So explain that to us.
Well, it's just the difference of the two worlds, my world and Uber's world. In my world, someone comes into my office, they want to drive, I make them go and get an abstract, I check their driving background and make sure that they are of the nature of someone who should be chauffeuring someone around. I also make them go get a background check, a criminal background check, to make sure that they also, you know, don't have a record in which they have had a felony type past where they're taking loved ones, people around, and not the type of person that I want my loved one riding with. Also, there's the appearance. If they come into my office, smelling like they just smoked a big bag of weed, that's just not someone that I would like riding and representing Broadway Taxi. Uber can't tell that over online while they're doing their little, online 5-minute interview to see if you're the type of person to drive for Uber. This is something that I can have a hands-on bill to grasp on who's taking care of the people of Buffalo.
So the hope, I guess, with Uber then is that's where the driver rating comes into play. Unfortunately, if someone has to have that bad experience before that driver can have a bad rating, I think that's probably what people are fearful of, is who gets to have the bad experience to generate.
But
rating.
any ratings can be fixed. Let's be honest. If you're the customer, you're not going to give the driver a bad rating, because guess what? You're not going to get another car.
Oh, because the customer can get a bad rating
that's
too.
right.
That's very
correct.
interesting. Very interesting. Well, thank you so much, Bill. And Bill is, of course, the owner of Liberty Cab. And thank you, Brian. And Brian is from Broadway Taxi. Thank you for joining us. Be safe on the roads. And it's an interesting discussion.
Call the cab.
Thanks so much for watching Talk of the Town, and as always, thanks to our viewers for watching WBBZ-TV.